Hi everybody, it's You Had to Ask, the show where I answer your questions. And my first question this week comes from Der Wunderbar Bar, who says, is Adi always as vocal as she sometimes is in Good News? What do you think about the Batman costume Ben will be wearing? Oh, she's pretty talkative most of the time. She's talkative now because I just picked her up against her will and she just wants down. So she's protesting. But she's pretty talkative most of the time. If you watch the video I put up, the most recent edition of the Off Monday Ramble, there's a sequence in there, a scene where she's in the kitchen. You can see her in the kitchen while I'm talking to Ashley. And she's trying to get Ashley's attention, and she's up on the table meowing, and that's pretty much how she is most of the time. She's very talkative. She's very vocal. She wasn't like that when we first got her. She was really, really quiet when we first got her. But I think because we talk to her a lot, like we're always having conversations with her and asking her what she's doing and just directing conversation at her, I think after a while she caught on, and now she's very vocal. As for Ben Affleck's Batman costume, I think, yeah, what do you think of it? I think it looks all right, just from the one picture that I've seen, but, you know, if the movie sucks, it won't matter how cool the costume is. And if the movie is great, it won't matter how shitty the costume is. The movie is what matters. You can have a shitty movie with an awesome-looking Batman, and you can have a great movie with kind of a so-so or kind of a shitty-looking Batman. It really doesn't matter. Here's one from Jarb2104. Hey Steve, hearing your answer about circumcision, a question came to my mind. How far should anyone go, or at least how far would you go if you had the power to stop people from imposing their thinking on their kids and probably ruining their lives forever, even by simply spoiling them too much? Taken to extremes, it would be to stop people from killing their own kids in the name of some sort of God or Lord. And that goes not only for religious nuts, but for people in my country. Many families would rather have their kids working the crops than sending them to school because they generate income for the family. How far do you think society should go, taking away those rights and liberties of the parents toward their kids, including regulating homeschooling, nutrition, how many should you have, and other things for and regarding kids? Sometimes I wonder if it would be best to simply take away all the newborns and let the country shape them into good citizens, but maybe that's too much of a Nazi dictatorship thinking. Yeah, I don't think I would like it if the government took custody of children and separated them completely from their parents. Just as a matter of policy. I don't think that's the way to go. I think the rights of the children are the vulnerable ones. The children are the ones who depend on the parents and to some extent on the rest of us to survive and to grow up and to prosper. So the rights of the children should come before the rights of the parents. I feel that very strongly. When people talk about parental rights, I mean, parental rights are important, but parental rights should always come after the rights of the child. What's in the best interest of the child should come first. Now, when you're talking about parental behavior that could harm a child, whether that behavior is based on their religious beliefs or not, I think that behavior should never be allowed. I mean, instances of a child being allowed to die as a result of neglect because the parents don't believe in modern medicine, or because they believe that if they pray hard enough, God will heal their sick child, that sort of thing. That should not be allowed. Parents who do that to their children should be held legally responsible, should be punished severely for that sort of thing. I have zero tolerance for that. I have zero sympathy for those parents or their beliefs or whatever their reasons are for neglecting and killing their children. But when it comes to instilling beliefs or instilling certain values or certain traditions, I mean, even though I might think that a given person's religious faith is bullshit, and I might think that it's destructive in some way, or it's backwards, or it's a very negative thing to instill in a vulnerable, innocent child who doesn't know any better, I'm not really comfortable with saying that you're not allowed to teach certain things to your children. That's where I think education comes in. That's why I think it's important to have a requirement that all children be educated and that there be standards in place, government regulated standards in place, whether you're talking about private school or homeschool or public school, so that all kids get a proper education. in history, in the sciences, in math, in English, in communication, in government, in a really solid basic education so that they will have the tools to think for themselves when they reach that age, and they will be able to evaluate the things that their parents or their church or whatever have told them, and they will be able to decide for themselves whether that makes sense to them as adults or whether it doesn't. I think education is absolutely crucial to that. But no, I don't think we should we should round up all the kids and take them to education camps away from their parents. And I don't think we should make it illegal to raise your child up in a particular faith or to teach your child particular things. I think education and protecting the rights and the safety of the child is the way to go. Pollexter 421. Question: Steve, I have a fellow atheist friend who I have shown at least some atheist videos on YouTube. His reaction, although agreeing, had been that the arguments presented would not change a thing for creationists, apologists, Christians, theocrats, etc. I feel that many atheists may have this opinion. How do we motivate this portion of the atheist population to view the fight for atheist causes as beneficial and necessary? Is there anything you want to specifically say to my friend? No, not really. I think it's important to respect the disinterest of other atheists in the conversation, the crusade, the great debate, whatever you want to call it, the engagement that many atheists like myself, like presumably you, like most of us loudmouth, obnoxious atheists on YouTube, we're very interested in this. We're very interested in sharing our points of view and having discussions and having debates and trying to shape the conversation and trying to bring a more secular, naturalistic, scientifically grounded atheist viewpoint to our culture and our politics and our national government policies and our laws and things like that. But not everybody feels that way. Not every atheist cares about the great debate. And that's fine. I think we should respect that. I don't think that we should go out of our way to try and, inspire and recruit atheists who, look, they're not convinced by the arguments of religion, they don't believe in God, they consider themselves atheists, but they're not very politically motivated, they're not interested in the philosophical quandaries, they're not interested in being teachers and proclaimers of atheism, and that's completely fine. If your friend's not into it, your friend's not into it. I mean, that's the sort of thing that you should just try to respect. It's not an atheist's job to be an advocate for atheism or to be a challenger of religion. Lots of us do that. I'm glad that lots of us do that. I think it's good. I think it's important. And I enjoy it when I do it. But it's not a requirement to be an atheist. And I think it's worth keeping that in mind. Louis Eng 114. As someone who does not drink alcohol, I wonder why people choose to drink beer, wine, etc. What is the reason you drink them, Steve? I suspect in the next 10 weeks or so, the reason will be because I'm reading a book by Ray Comfort and doing a video series on it every week. That will be the reason in the immediate future that I'm drinking. In general, it's a social thing. It's something that, when I grew up, my dad drank with his friends, and then when I was old enough, my dad drank with me, and, it's a way of sort of extending a hand of friendship or making someone feel welcome, offering them a beer. That's just the way it is in my family. That's the way it is with my friends around here. It's just a social thing, a matter of culture and tradition, custom. I've developed a little bit of a taste, at least a tolerance for beer and Jägermeister because that's just what I drink the most. But I'm not a big whiskey drinker. I'm not a big vodka drinker. Most types of alcohol I just avoid because I just can't stand the way they taste. I just don't have a palate for it. So the kind of alcohol that I do drink is the kind that I have just drank the most and I just have a tolerance for. And it's, it helps you relax. It makes evenings a little more fun, a little more smooth. But it's just a social thing, And if you don't drink right now, if you've never gotten into it and you've never felt the need for it and you don't see the point, I certainly am not going to recommend it to you. You're probably better off not doing it. Adderall Apocalypse. One time I asked you what you thought of Zack Snyder in general, but I think I must have confused you because I also asked about a particular De Palma film in the same question. So I'd like to ask again what you think of Snyder in general, because you seemed to like Watchmen. I, of course, have mixed feelings about him. For example, I didn't actually, like 300, but I think that might have had more to do with the source material than what he did with it. In fact, I think he might have done as good a job with it as any director could have. Anyway, maybe you would know how to articulate on this topic better than I could. Thanks. I did like Watchmen a lot. I still like Watchmen. I've watched it several times, both in the theater when it was first out and then on DVD since. And I do really enjoy that movie. And I liked Snyder's remake of Dawn of the Dead. And I didn't think I would, because the original George Romero Dawn of the Dead is one of my favorite horror movies. And I wasn't expecting a whole lot from the remake from this unknown director, but I thought he did a good job with that. But those are the only two films of his that I have ever liked. I mean, even like a little. Like, for most of his other films that I've seen, I just find him incredibly obnoxious and hyperactive and not particularly subtle. He just makes loud, flashy movies that seem just desperate to get your attention and to impress you. He doesn't seem... I mean, he's very technically skilled. He's a very technically skilled director, and he definitely has a very particular, very strong visual style. It just happens to be a style that I just find it obnoxious. The overuse of slow motion, like the sort of slow down slow motion where the punch starts at normal speed and then it's like, that's just so obnoxious. His action scenes tend to be really, really overlong. That was a big problem I had with Man of Steel, is that the action scenes were just incredibly long and became very tedious, and there was just so many of them. There were so many action beats. Traditionally, a Hollywood film, the rule of thumb is some sort of an action beat every 10 pages of a script, which is about every 10 minutes of film. But Zack Snyder's rule seems to be a major action set piece every, 5 minutes. I mean, literally, if you watch Man of Steel, there's, a major action set piece, and then when you're still just barely sort of coming down from that one, another one starts right up. You have no chance to breathe. And it's exhausting and it's irritating. So yeah, he's over the top. He's not very subtle, both in terms of his storytelling and in terms of just his visual style. And I like subtlety. I prefer subtlety to being shouted at this far from my fucking face, and that's what I feel like Zack Snyder usually does. It's like he's literally right here, and he's just fucking screaming at me as hard as he can. And I don't like that. And I just feel like that's what Zack usually does. So other than his Dawn of the Dead and Watchmen, I really don't think he's done that good of a job. Warp Rules. Hi, Steve. Could you give some examples, movies, TV shows, of what you consider excellent screenwriting? What makes good screenwriting? What makes bad screenwriting? Well, if you want specific examples, I'm a huge fan of Paul Thomas Anderson as a writer. I'm a huge fan of the Coen brothers as writers. I mean, everybody says Tarantino, but I mean, Tarantino. I think he's a terrific screenwriter. There are a lot of really excellent screenwriters. I mean, Robert Towne is a good one, the writer of Chinatown. He's one of the all-time great screenwriters. But as far as TV shows, I mean, I just watched the most recent episode of it today. The TV show Louie, I think is one of the best written things that has ever been on television. I can't praise that show enough. I think it's just, I mean, it impresses me more and more every time I watch it. The thing about good screenwriting is that if a screenwriter does his job, you, as the viewer, at least the first time you watch a movie, and particularly if you're just an average moviegoer and you're not looking at it with a critical eye, you don't notice the writing. A good screenwriter writes so as to be essentially invisible, to leave no fingerprints on the finished product. Screenwriting is the most thankless job in the movie production, because if you do your job right, nobody even knows you were there. It just feels like things are just happening. It feels like the characters are just saying what's on their mind. They're just making up the dialogue as they go along. If you do your job, and of course, if the director and the actors hold up their end, it's smooth and it's seamless and it's like you were never even there. And bad screenwriting to me is exactly the opposite. When it feels like the writer's fingerprints are on everything, when it feels like the writer is trying too hard to make his presence felt, to write his kind of dialogue, to impress you with the incredibly complex, twisted, complicated plot that he was able to come up with. That's bad screenwriting. When you notice it and it's irritating and obnoxious. William Goldman, another great screenwriter. He wrote Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. He wrote The Princess Bride. Just a legendary screenwriter. He also wrote some books on screenwriting that you should probably read if you're interested in screenwriting. And one of his complaints was how thankless screenwriting is. One of his complaints was, that if you read movie reviews, they typically praise, if they like the movie, they'll praise the director, they'll praise the actors, they'll praise the cinematographers, they'll say what a beautiful looking film it was, what a wonderfully shot film it was. And they very rarely will praise the screenwriter, unless it's a writer-director type of thing. William Goldman had selfish reasons for saying that. There's my talkative cat again. William Goldman had selfish reasons for saying that because he felt unappreciated as one of the great screenwriters in Hollywood. But I disagree with him on that. I think the screenwriter's job isn't to get noticed. The screenwriter's job, if they do it right, is to not get noticed. At least not by the audience while they're watching the film. Ryan Swanson, Steve, seeing that you gave a shout out to Girl Does Rant, I was wondering, what did you think of her radical feminism video? Also, how is it that you've done a 5 Stupid Things About video about almost every polarizing topic except feminism? It's bizarre to me. Forgive me if you've already addressed this. Her slight disagreement with me on feminism is maybe one of the reasons why I would have hesitated to give Girl Does Rant a shout out, but I felt like her content overall is just so great, and the fact that we disagree, and she's not anti-feminist, but the fact that we disagree on that, or that I don't think radical feminism is that big of a deal, and I think it's a really overblown topic, it wasn't enough for me to justify just not giving her a shout out, because I do think she does good stuff. And 5 Stupid Things About Feminism is something that I would do if I can figure out my way into it. I would want that to be, that would be a tough one to write. I have done 5 Stupid Things about things that I like in the past, but I've never done 5 Stupid Things about the civil rights movement. I've never done 5 Stupid Things about, LGBT equality movements. So, and feminism I put in that category. I think it's a human rights movement. It's an equality movement, and I think it does good work, and I think it's necessary, and it's something that I support 100%. So if I was going, I'm not saying that it's impossible for me to have some fun with it or to give it some constructive criticism or, and whatever I would hope that I would do with a 5 Stupid Things video. I just would want to make sure that I did it right. It's something that I would want to wait until I had something I was sure that I wanted to say, that I felt was good and challenging and worthwhile, and I wouldn't just want to make up 5 things and just kind of toss it off. Philip Rottingham, hey Steve, since you've been talking about Star Trek the last couple of weeks, I was wondering, if you were given the chance to make your own Star Trek TV series, what would it be like? Would you want to return to one of the older series or make a new series with your own set of cast and characters? Would you use the traditional Trek setting of a starship or go for something more unique like Deep Space Nine? Maybe a Twilight Zone sort of thing where each episode has its own self-contained story and characters. Would you want to have it set in the Prime universe or the new one created by the 2009 reboot? Any other ideas? Thanks. I would want it to have original characters that I would create. I would want it to be on a starship. I would want it to, in tone and in structure, it would probably be closer to the original series than any of the other ones. I mean, I would want it to be an adventure show. I'd want the ship to be going places. I'd want them to be going to new planets every week. Adventure stuff, not diplomatic stuff. That's one of the things, even though Next Generation was a great show, they had all those episodes where they were negotiating a treaty, or they were transporting ambassadors, or, they were helping settlers onto a new colony. It's like, and I realize this is the sort of stuff that maybe a starship would have to do if we pretend that it's real. But I like the pulpy stuff, the adventure stuff, the space opera type stuff. So that's what I would do. Mostly self-contained stories, not a whole lot of season-long story arcs, no wars, no long-term like conflict stories, just adventures, like good old-fashioned sci-fi space adventure. That's what it would be. And as for when it would be set, I don't know. I would kind of like it would be cool if I could just write it so that you could interpret it as having been set in either universe. It could, I mean, maybe I could even fuck with the fanboys and acknowledge continuity from both. I could, in some episodes, I could acknowledge shit that happened in the Abrams Star Trek movies, and in some I could acknowledge shit that happened in the original version, just to fuck with people's heads. Because honestly, it's all made up and it's fake anyway. Who fucking cares? So that's what I would do. I don't think I would be allowed to do that. I'm pretty sure Paramount and the Star Trek powers that be would force me to set it in a particular place and to nail it down and to go to Star Trek conventions and say it's set in the Abrams universe. But if I had like my complete creative control, I would want to set it in both and neither and say, who fucking cares? Just watch the show. Do you think it's a good show? Do you enjoy it? Good. Then just watch it. And who fucking cares what fake universe that it's set in? It's going to have to cut off my rant, my anti-canon rant, because that means that it is now time for... You fucking... You interrupted my...
The lightning round. Rapid fire questions. Glib and adequate answers.
There's another reason to drink, being married. Oh, I am Rob. Question: are you amused or saddened by the level of vitriol in the comments of your 5 Stupid Things videos? Both. There are times when I'm amused, and there are also times when I'm saddened by it. I mean, the vitriol is mostly a source of amusement. The non-vitriolic comments that are just used, that express just really insane or offensive shit, they're the ones that kind of sadden me, or that really say stupid stuff. The vitriol is usually a source of amusement, because, I mean, why are people getting so upset over a 5-minute video on YouTube from me? Noof Signaler T, if that's how that's pronounced. Have you read the Song of Ice and Fire series? Nope. Never read it, and I have not seen a single episode of Game of Thrones. The Brexter, how do you feel about the books written by Stephen King? Also, how do you feel about the genre of horror in general, movies, books, etc.? I haven't read much Stephen King. I think the only Stephen King book that I've ever read from start to finish was The Stand, which is enough. It's like a fucking encyclopedia. And I like The Stand a lot, but that's the only book of Stephen King's that I've ever read. I love horror. I mentioned the original Dawn of the Dead earlier in this video. I think it's awesome. I love classic horror. I love universal horror. And really most of the projects I've worked on with Neon Reel Entertainment have been horror in some way or another. I love horror. The Accountable Account. Hey Steve, who do you consider your arch nemesis? And could you shout their name Captain Kirk style? Thanks. I don't really have an arch nemesis, you know, in person or on YouTube or anything like that. But at the moment, I'm reading Ray Comfort for my new An Atheist Read series. And I guess I would probably have to say, Ray Comfort! That's all I got. Curtis Morrison, is it just me, or are your lightning round answers not quite as glib and inadequate as they used to be? You know, you're right, Curtis. It's not just you. But I'm working on it. Okay? Can you just allow me to work on it? Please? NanoMenser71. Hey Steve, do you like ice cream? If so, what's your favorite flavor? Oh, I love ice cream. And my favorite flavor is probably chocolate chip cookie dough. Especially Hershey's chocolate chip cookie dough. That shit is awesome. Sanjuro, which episodes of DS9 did you think were awful? The Ferengi ones mostly, and the Loaxana Troy episodes. There were 2 or 3 episodes where Loaxana Troy appeared on the station, and those were uniformly awful. Because, like, what the fuck is she doing there? Her daughter worked on the Enterprise. That's why she was there. But what the fuck is she doing on Deep Space Nine? She's a horrible character. She was a horrible actress. I'm sorry, I know she's dead, but she was terrible. It was a terrible character. What was she doing on Deep Space Nine? Adam Eastlake, what do you think is the worst? Homophobia, racism, or sexism? I think that those are 3 variations of the same thing. I don't think one is any worse than the other. They're the same thing. Lonely Naturalist, Steve, what do you think is the best superhero film? The worst? The best is Superman Returns. The worst is probably Batman and Robin. Although the Spawn movie from 1997, I think, was pretty terrible too. But if I had to pick, I guess I would go Batman and Robin. Go with the nice, reliable answer. Hey, that's it for the questions. Before I get out of here, I'm going to do a shout out. And the shout out this week goes to a very deserving channel that I'm surprised I haven't given a shout out to before now. But I'm going to rectify that right now because the shout out goes to Robin Dupre Reed. And technically her YouTube handle is the Chad1218, but her on-screen name, her channel name is Robin Dupre Reed, and she is terrific. She is absolutely terrific. She does a weekly series called Random Rants, where she just talks about whatever's on her mind, things in the news. She does a series where she's right now she's going through the Bible and commenting on Bible verses. It's called A Little Light Reading. At the moment, she's in the book of Exodus. She's been working her way through the book of Exodus for the last couple of months, I think, the last couple of weeks at least. And she posted a video last week, earlier this week actually, on as a response to the responses to the Santa Barbara shooting, the Elliot Rodgers shooting. She had some really excellent, very insightful things to say about the response of certain, like, people on Twitter or commenters to the Elliot Rodgers shooting. People who, said things like, well, if he, if those girls had just given him some pussy, maybe this all could have been prevented. Or, these things, this is what happens when guys like this don't get laid. And, sort of trying to lay the blame on the women who apparently rejected this guy. And Robin has some very strong things to say about it, and I could not agree with her more. What she says goes double for me. So great channel all around, and that video specifically highly recommended. Robin Dupre Reed, awesome channel. Check it out. Criminally undersubbed. So give her a look. See if it's your cup of tea as well. That's it for this week, everybody. Thank you for watching. I will be back next week to do this all over again, provided, of course, that you ask me some questions, because in order for this to work, you have to ask. So leave a comment on this video with your question for next time. Ask me anything about anything. I will try to answer as many of them as I possibly can in the next video. So until then, I will see you. Have a good week, everybody.